Anything you don't want me to ask you about?
You can ask me anything. I may not answer it. You know, personal stuff I don't answer, or I don't like to talk about projects that I'm working on now, but you can ask me, but I'm very superstitious, so I never talk about the things I'm about to do.
Okay, so I won't.
You can, I just don't, you know, I have a few up my sleeve, and the thing I've been working on lately keeps getting delayed for various reasons out of my control, so.
What's the thing people ask you about the most?
What?
What did they ask you about the most when you...
Oh man, I don't know, because usually I only do this when I have a particular film to promote, you know? So it's usually about that film.
So why are you doing this?
So.
This is just...
Well, I love Rome, and I was invited to come, so I just couldn't resist.
It's a very great pleasure to meet you, sir.
Thank you.
Unexpected, too. I didn't know about this until relatively recently. Ci siamo? Un po' più alla mia... Okay. I do not have the best verbal technique in the history of verbal techniques. I tend to speak a little clumsily, and sometimes I speak a little sotto voce, so please don't hesitate to yell. I don't understand
Okay, well, I
you're
can
saying.
be very inarticulate, and I talk very slowly sometimes, so I'm not the best either.
Okay.
And you edit this later, so...
I do. In fact, I do. And...
so they can make us look better.
Oh, I make you look great.
The editors.
Yeah. No. I'll make you look good. So there's no way. If you don't ramble on, then that's better.
Okay.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with telling a long story, but as long as there's, you know, I think you would know yourself, you know, how it's pacing out. But and I don't know how much time we necessarily have, or how much you want to put up with this, but
Well, let's see.
we'll try and cover most of the bases. Yeah. Don't lean too much forward.
The close-up is very sorry, does anybody have a cell phone?
Oh. I can't get it out with this.
That's it.
It was right next to your pack, too. Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay.
Ci siamo? Può cominciare? Allora. Mr. Jim Jarmusch, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to the auditorium in Rome.
Thank you.
First question, very complex question. Why did you want to become a film director?
Well, it is difficult. Originally I studied literature and wanted to be a writer, a poet, which is not the most easy profession. I was in a rock and roll band in the late 70s, early 80s. I was also writing a lot, and I was seeing a lot of films. In fact, in the mid-70s, I went to Paris to study and spent most of my time at the Cinémathèque in France, in Paris, and saw such a variety of films from around the world that the form of cinema just became it went so deep in me that I just found it such a beautiful form. And then my writing started imitating or referring to films and film scripts and the way films are written about. And then on a whim, I applied to go to film school. and was able to go there for a few years and started making films.
You make it almost sound like before going to Paris you'd never been to a movie theater.
Well, I'm from Akron, Ohio, which is not exactly a capital of cinema. Although my mother was a film reviewer before she was married for a small newspaper. So she knew she was interested in movies, but more mainstream kind of films. But I saw films as a child in Akron, mostly horror films and films for kids. But really, going to Paris was really when I realized what cinema was and the range of possibilities as a form of expression.
But you had actually wanted to be a poet.
Well, I studied with some really great poets from what they call the New York School of Poets. Kenneth Koch and David Shapiro were teachers of mine at Columbia University. And I was always very interested in poetry as kind of outsiders, people that don't express things for money. There aren't so many wealthy poets throughout history. And it just was, something close to me, writing and poetry. But all these things kind of merge, music and any form of expression, cinema and poetry and fiction, painting, design, they're all connected and they're all incorporated in film. So film has so many elements within it of certain forms,
Was there any risk that we'd have lost you to the music business?
Yeah, I've always felt that it was an odd turn of coincidence that I started making films, because I think I sort of always felt I was destined to be a musician. And at some point I took a detour. At the point when I was working as a musician was when I really started learning about filmmaking.
What instrument did you play?
Well, I played the very primitive synthesizers and keyboards, vocals and guitars, but usually oddly tuned guitars. So I played a number of things, none of them as an expert, not a virtuoso on any instrument. I still play guitar and still make music for myself.
What was the name of the band?
Our band was called the Del Byzantines, and we played in New York and other cities in the U.S., went to London once, had a few records.
So what were the kind of films that you saw in Paris which sort of triggered this connection to the poetry and the music?
Well, I saw so many films, that I didn't know about. Films by Ray from India, films, Japanese films by Naruse and Ozu, films by Jean Jarmusch, films by Jacques Rivette and the Nouvelle Vague, classical French films, a lot of Hollywood films from the 40s and 50s. Great directors like Sam Fuller and Nick Ray and Billy Wilder, Max O'Fools, who worked in Europe and the U.S. So it was just like a wealth of all different types of films.
Obviously, from that point of view, the exposure to films you otherwise would not have seen, the film school sort of system has a role. But other directors that obviously we've spoken to have sort of, in a way, poo-pooed. They've gone, film school, you forget about film school, you've got to get behind a camera. Do you believe in film schools from the technical point of view, or?
I don't really. I think I would agree. I had a few people that taught in the film school that were very good and opened up my own perception about filmmaking. But a lot of it I really had to unlearn or ignore. And I also didn't get a degree in film school because my final year I got a kind of a scholarship, actually called the Louis B. Mayer Scholarship. Louis B. Mayer being, for me, a kind of villain because he destroyed Erich von Stroheim's film Greed and destroyed Buster Keaton's some of his films. But in his name, I got a scholarship that was sent to me directly rather than the film school. So rather than pay tuition, I made my first film, a short feature-length film called Permanent Vacation. And that was not acceptable by the school, so I wasn't given a degree. I was some years later, but so I wasn't really so involved in film school, but I did meet some good people there, people that I met Spike Lee there, and Tom DiCillo, and Sarah Driver, and some interesting people. But the school itself, you know, I really think, for example, you weren't allowed to take courses in cinema history. It was all technical things about filmmaking, which is great, and I learned a lot from it. But to me, without being interested in the history of cinema or the history of expression in general, that's where your inspiration comes from. You can be driven by great examples of expression before you. So that seemed kind of a drag that you couldn't really even access those things in film school. There was a class they were giving on Giga Vertov, and it was a seminar, and I wasn't allowed to take it, but I kept going each time, and each time the professor would say, "You're not in this class," and ask me to leave. So after the fifth time, I stopped trying, but it was very difficult to see Giga Vertov's films in New York, as it still is, and they were showing all of them. So I was like hungry to see them, but I was told to leave each time. So I found that kind of disconcerting.
What problem did they have with permanent vacation?
They didn't want you to make a feature-length film as your thesis project in film school. They wanted a 20-minute film. But friends of mine at the time, this is at the beginning of what is now called like punk rock period of New York in the late 70s, and friends like Amos Poe and Eric Mitchell, James Nares, Beth and Scott B., a lot of people were making films on their own. And so I wanted to make one as well, and so I proceeded to do so, and I wasn't following the rules of the school, you know.
Have you ever followed the rules?
Well, I think rules are very valuable. I think they set up things, and I think you kind of have to know the rules in order to break them. I really liked, now it's over 10 years ago, this theory, Dogma 95, which was learning the rules and then reducing them to the most minimum rules. And I never made a film following Dogma 95, but I liked the concept of it. It was sort of, for me, kind of like the Ramones or the Sex Pistols approach to rock and roll, like stripping it down to really the essential elements and using those as a kind of expression.
So we're talking which period when you were having these issues with the film school?
Late 70s.
Now, that's sort of entering into history is quite a phenomenal period. I mean, freedom, artistic freedom, it was sort of the tail end of the so-called modern age of American cinema. Was that a tangible feeling at the time, apart from the dreadful fashion?
It was a little bit because of, well, in New York, you know, Scorsese was still filming like on the streets, basically, and all of those people working in LA, and Jonathan Demme was working then, and Coppola, and so yeah, I think we were aware of certain styles in cinema, but we were even more interested in reducing it more. We were interested in not being considered professionals. Like, I still consider myself an amateur filmmaker rather than a professional, because professional means you do something for money, for a job, and the root of the word amateur is a love of something. So I still consider myself an amateur filmmaker. And everyone back then, all the musicians, it was about the love of music and rock and roll and expression, not about filling a stadium or getting a big record deal. So it was a kind of vibrant period, and everyone exchanged ideas, and a lot of friends that I made back then are still incredibly influential to me and remain friends, but people, painters, musicians, filmmakers, people working in a lot of different forms.
How old were you then?
In my mid-20s, early 20s.
And you were not thinking about a career, you were just...
No, I wasn't, much to my father's regret. who was always saying, why don't you learn to be a lawyer? Why don't you study something real? What is this, the obsession with music and movies? You know, when are you going to grow up? But later, as some of my films got, after Stranger Than Paradise and Down by Law were seen, at least, you know, seen around the world to some degree, my father became very supportive and changed in that way. But before that, he was not.
You needed something to fall back on.
Exactly.
Heard that a few times.
And I had a lot of jobs in my life that, you know, didn't last very long. I don't know. So, but they weren't really professional jobs, things like driving a cab or being a moving man or working in a factory or a steel foundry, or I was a welder's apprentice for a while and stuff like that, a lot of industrial jobs. But that was not really what I intended to do for the rest of my life. Although I'm glad I did those things, because I think I observed a lot of interesting things in some of those strange jobs that I had.
Did you actually enjoy doing these jobs when you were doing them?
No. No, I wanted to go out and hear rock and roll or meet some girls or do something fun, you know.
I mean, what was your vision of what you wanted to be doing?
Back then?
Yeah, as you were welding.
Well, I wanted to live the romantic life of a poet or a rock and roll musician, and I just wanted to live my own life and not have a boss and be able to do what I want in my life. And I basically followed that. I still feel very lucky that I still wake up sometimes thinking, oh man, you know, one of these days I'm going to have to get a real job. But I feel very lucky to make movies.
So what was the step from Permanent Vacation to Stranger Than Paradise?
Well, I made Permanent Vacation, and honestly, I thought, okay, I made a film. I'll never get to make another one, but at least I got to make one. It's imperfect. It's a kind of juvenile, you know, an early work, someone that doesn't really know the form, but obviously loves the form. But a lot of things are very kind of awkward in the film, learning to work with actors and things. The people were all my friends in the film. So I figured, okay, I'll never make another film, and was playing in the band and thought, I guess I thought I would follow music. But then I wanted to make another film. I wrote a little story, an idea for a film with John Lurie, which became the first third of my next film, Stranger Than Paradise. And I got some help. Wim Wenders gave me some leftover film material, unexposed film stock that he had from a film he made in LA and Portugal called The State of Things. And he had seen my first film, and I had met him because I was Nicholas Ray's assistant, and Nick Ray Wim made a film with Nick when Nick was dying. And so I had met Wim, and he had seen my film, and he offered me some free film stock. So I decided I had enough to make a 30-minute film. So we went ahead and made a 30-minute short film, Stranger Than Paradise, the first third of the film. And while editing that film, I wrote the rest of it as a feature. So I had the finished film, the first third finished as a short, but I had in a kind of modular way, I had two more sections I wanted to make it a feature. So it took a couple years to finally get some money to do that, to convince some people to help me do that. It was a very inexpensive film, but still a struggle. And then made that film, and much to my surprise, it was selected for the Cannes Film Festival in the Director's Fortnight. It showed in some other film festivals and got distribution. So at that point, I was like, man, I'm going on to another one. I see if I can get over again. You know, it was kind of like, how long can I trick people into letting me do this? So I proceeded from there, and then made another one in '86, Down by Law, and I'm still trying to get over that way, you know.
Told like that, it does sound quite effortless, which is probably not the case.
It's not effortless in any respect. It was a lot of work and difficult, but you know, it was done kind of. We were working guerrilla style with my friends, you know, people close, very small crew, and we didn't really follow rules of having permission to shoot places. We would just go and do it, and then if the police came and told us to leave, we'd leave, and if we weren't done, we'd come back later and try to film some more until we were thrown off of somewhere, you know. So, and editing and financially, you know, I had no money, so it was always that, you know, case of owing the landlords money. I had some very difficult landlords in New York that were kind of thugs and kind of rough and always threatening me, you know. It was that kind of thing, so you'd have to be hiding from the landlord. And yeah, it was a lot of work, you know. Making a film is very hard. Somebody, I think Dennis Hopper said in an interview once, said, you know, it's just hard to make a film. It's just as hard to make a bad film as it is to make a good film. It's just really hard to make a film. So it takes really a lot of energy.
So how did you feel, I mean, you were at Cannes, presumably, when you won the Camera d'Or, and you're going from basically running from the landlord, hiding from the landlords, your thuggish landlords in New York, to going up and accepting awards in Cannes, France. I mean, is that a trip or what?
Yeah, it was pretty strange to me. I still find it strange. I still find it strange when I have had films in Cannes, you know, more recently. I still sometimes wonder why are they showing my film again exactly? But you know, I think if you want to make a film, you have to believe with your whole soul that you're gonna make the film. And if you even start doubting yourself and think, maybe I'll make the film, but maybe I won't, your chances will just diminish, because you have to really, you just have to know that you're going to do it, and you have to have a kind of motto of people can help me or not help me, but they're not going to stop me. And you just have to kind of keep that attitude at all times. So I still have that attitude when I'm going to make a film. I'm going to make it, you know, I'm going to fight and make it. And I've had a few times when I couldn't make a certain film and had to move to another project, but I also keep a number of projects up my sleeve always at the same time. So if something isn't working right, I have something else to move to.
Why did you pursue black and white through at least 3?
Well, I don't know exactly, you know, it's sort of subjective. I know when I was really small, a child, I was interested in the oldest movies that were on TV, like the ones that were the furthest removed from me historically were the most fascinating. And I'm not sure why, but they seemed more magical, more mysterious, the old cars, the way people dressed. And so that black and white thing was really instilled in me. And it's such a beautiful thing, black and white cinema, and it's so big a part of the history of cinema that certain stories that I had in my head, like Stranger Than Paradise and Down by Law and Dead Man, I saw them from the very beginning, even before writing the script, in black and white. So I just stick to that, you know, and I had trouble, especially with Dead Man. I never got enough money to really properly make the film. And people potential investors in the film would say, we'll give you more if you make it in color. But I said, no, it's a black and white film, you know, so I had to really stick to my guns in that way. But black and white is, you know, it gives you less information, and that can be very magical in a way. It can leave more to your imagination. So certain things, I think, need to be told. Certain stories work better if they're told in black and white. And there are a lot of different ways to use black and white as well. So I don't know, I still love black and white.
Different ways to use black and white would be?
Yeah, black and white film materials. There are a variety of film stocks. There's different gray scales within a material. You can have a very subtle and varied palette of blacks and whites, or you can have a very harsh, contrasty black and white. You have to light black and white in a very different way than color. For example, if you have a character who's standing in front of, say, a red wall, that character's skin tones and clothes are separated from the color, the field red. If it's black and white, then that background is a gray tone. So you have to light them in a different way to get the proper separation that you want of the physical person from their background. So you think differently in black and white. And I had the great experience of working on my third film, Down by Law, with Robbie Mueller, who I've worked with consequently, who taught me a lot about thinking in black and white while shooting. And he's the first person who gave me a contrast viewing filter to see the contrast and look at the scene as you're lighting it and get a sense of how the film material is going to read that and how it will be on the screen. So he taught me a lot about the beauty of black and white and the difference in lighting it than lighting color. Of course, color too has an almost infinite number of varieties of ways to use it. But black and white also, it's not just one thing. And I used to get very annoyed early on when people said, well, black and white is from the past. Why do you use that? We have color film now, you know? And to me, that was always like people saying the invention of photography means that there's no need for anyone to paint anymore, you know? Or since you have a computer, there's no need to write with a pencil, or, you know. And these things are all just tools for expression. So I'm not hierarchical about technology. I'm more interested in what carries your imagination to the form that you're using.
Jean-Claude Carrière is a French writer, screenwriter. He wrote this incredible book, The Secret Language of Film. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's one of my favorite books about cinema. And in it he observes that essentially sooner or later down the line it's all going to get wrapped up in 20th century cinema. So whatever they're making in 1910, in 1930, in 1980, or in 1990, you're just going to get wrapped in. So the black and white, the color issue will simply no longer exist in terms of recalling the past.
Well, that's how I felt, because, you know, when you're looking at the history of cinema, you know, what percentage of it is black and white? 50% maybe, you know, of the existing films that exist, maybe more. So it's, you know, it's certainly one use of film material that's, you know, ingrained in us. It's in your subconsciousness.
If you had to say a few words about Nicholas Ray, what would you say?
I don't know if I could say a few words about Nicholas Ray. He's one of my favorite American film directors. I think his first film, They Live by Night, which was, I think, 1949, is one of the most beautiful pieces of cinema ever. Just incredible. And he went on to make films equally beautiful. Some of my favorites are certainly In a Lonely Place, which has the most beautiful performance I think Humphrey Bogart ever gave. But I don't know, there's a kind of elegance to Nicholas Ray's work, a true sense of love of cinema from someone who started making films actually quite late in his life. I mean, not late for him, but I think he was 40 or so when he made his first film. And he had come from a place of theater and music and doing radio shows, the history of music, of popular music, and had worked in the theater a lot. So he kind of was brought to that form after having a great love for other forms. So that's something very close to me. And I love that about him. And he used to always say, you know, you'll find your inspiration in places where you're not looking, and you should always be open to it, and don't just look for inspiration on filmmaking from films, because you're going to find it in conversations you overhear, and in the crack in a wall when you're taking a walk, or in the color of of the light, the sunlight on a tree, or from something you read, from literature or from painting. So he was very aware that all these forms sort of collide in filmmaking. But he also was a really great director of actors. And, well, I'm not giving you a short answer at all, and I'm not even getting started. But he taught me a lot of things, just in little things he said. He told me once that, well, one great quote I love from him, he didn't say to me, he said, if you're just going to film the script, then don't bother. Meaning that a film is something that grows as you make it. And if you're just following a diagram, you're going to lose the essence, the possibility of all the collaborations involved in filmmaking. He also said that when you're filming, when you're filming a scene, never think about the other scenes in the film. Don't think about what scene comes before it or what scene comes after. Think only about the scene that you're filming. And if you do that, you will have a collection of little jewels that you can put together, but they will work. But once you start thinking about the thing as a whole, again, you're thinking about a diagram, you're thinking about an overview, and the most important thing is to be there at that moment, to be a kind of navigator and guide for the actors and the director of photography and everything that comes together into this moment of the film. He also told me never discuss a scene with all the actors in it together, the meaning of the scene, because it means a different thing for each character, which helped me a lot. I never talk about the meaning of a scene, say there are 4 people in the scene. I talk to each one separately, because their character's perspective on that scene is different from each of the others. So that was very helpful.
Your films have a very distinct rhythm, I would think it's fair to say. Some people would say it's slow, some people say it's measured, some people say it's a Jim Jarmusch film. Did anyone try and discourage you from that? Or did the fact that Stranger Than Paradise went straight to Cannes and did fairly well for you sort of?
Well, nobody's ever really told me how to do it, so it's really a thing I'm still trying to learn, how to make a film. And I hope I'll be trying to learn it, until I die. It's not, if I really thought I knew how to do it, I guess I'd stop doing it, So it's not something that I look to other people to explain, like, well, you should have a faster rhythm. And, I think stories need what they need, and different people have different rhythms innately. And some filmmakers, each film may seem very different from the others stylistically, and others have something that connects them. But it's not a conscious thing that I analyze or that I'm trying to do. Maybe it's the way I talk or the way I move. I realized something, the RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan, who's a friend of mine and did the score for Ghost Dog, The Way of the Samurai, he has a very, very specific sense of how he uses beats, and in his early music, it's very, very particular and was imitated a lot. But there's something that it's almost like a stutter sometimes in the beat. And I realize when RZA talks, he gets very excited, and sometimes there's almost a stutter in the rhythm of his thinking, of his verbalizing what he's thinking. And I thought, wow, maybe that's connected. I don't know if it is or not, but I found it interesting. So you don't really know where these things come from. They're just something, the way you express something. And I don't think the person doing it is the person that can analyze it usually, And I wouldn't say to RZA, maybe how you talk is like where you get your beats from. He'd probably think I was out of my mind. But in fact, I think there might be some connection there. But it's all mysterious to me,
Our voices are our personal frequencies, and that frequency goes into everything we do, whether we realize it or not.
Possibly, or maybe how we move, or, I don't know. Again, I'm really the worst person. I'm not self-analytical, so I try not to overthink about why I do what I do. I believe much more in intuition. and just, if you feel it's right, then follow that feeling, but don't overthink it. It's like in music, when musicians think too much about what they're doing, I think they often lose the beauty of what they're doing, you know? And a lot of musicians over the years have said that, from Ornette Coleman to Neil Young, you know? You don't think too much when you're playing, because it's not a purely intellectual endeavor, you know? You're speaking through an instrument, but it's your emotions that are speaking through it. So you don't want to think too much about it. You might lose the strength of it somehow. That might be just an easy way out of answering a question, but it's not really my intention. But
Down by Law, John Lurie, Tom Waits, and Mr. Benini. How do you get those three together?
well, I was sketching out a story for Tom Waits and John Lurie, both of whom I knew. And I just thought, and I had worked with John, I had not worked with Tom, but I just thought, I want to write something for these two guys. So I was sketching out a story, but there was some element missing, I don't know, I wasn't sure yet. It was very early stage. Then I came to Italy to a film festival in Salso Maggiore, where I was on a jury with just 5 people. And one of the other jury members was Roberto. And in fact, I only came to this festival because a friend had died, Enzo Ungari, and who I knew already. And his wife also knew Roberto, I guess. And somehow she worked for the festival. And Marijke, she's Dutch, and she called me and said, please come and be on the festival and we can all see a lot of friends together. So I went there, and I met this guy on the jury the first day, Roberto. I had never heard of him. I didn't know who he was. Somehow we were sort of the bad kids in the jury. We were the ones that the director of the festival would find smoking cigarettes in the alley while the film we were supposed to be watching was being shown. And somehow we became, and we talked in broken French because Roberto didn't speak English and I spoke no Italian. And we both spoke flawed French. So we had these endless conversations in French about everything, about philosophers and painters, poets, about movies, about music, about friends that we knew. And we just kind of bonded over this, I don't know, 1 week period. And so after the festival was over, I came to Rome. And I wrote a treatment based on the ideas I'd collected for Tom Waits and John Lurie, including Roberto. And I wrote it actually at Enzo's desk in Rome. And there was a picture of him there. I don't know, it was like he was guiding me in a way. And I wrote it very fast in 3 or 4 days, 5 days. I wrote a 20-page, 25-page outline of this story. Then I gave it to Roberto. Someone helped him translate it or translated it for him verbally. I asked him, Roberto, what do you think of this story? I have this idea. And he said he wanted to do it. So I went back to New York and started preparing the film. And that's how the three of them got roped together.
Did they get on?
Yes, they did. We're still all close friends.
Why, is it just a coincidence that you had the two musicians and an Italian comedian? Just staying with the two musicians for a second. You knew John Lurie from before, you knew Tom Waits. How did you meet Tom Waits, for that matter?
I met Tom Waits in the early 80s in New York because he's a California guy, grew up in LA and still lives there. But there was a period where he moved to New York. And just through the kind of, music scene or hanging out, I ran into him a few times. Actually, the first time we were introduced was at a party a friend of mine, the painter Jean-Michel Basquiat had, and Tom was there, and I was like, that's Tom Waits, and I just started talking to him. And I remember that night, Tom and I ended up going to different bars and clubs the whole night and going home when it was light out. And after that evening, we just were friends, And I was a big fan of Tom's anyway, which was kind of hard, but then you meet him and you see the real person. He was even more interesting to me in some ways. So, those two guys, it was, back then I was writing, and I still often write for people I already know, because there are parts of their personality that I want to put into a character and have them play that. Of course, they're not playing themselves. That's the thing that used to bother me in the early days. Even Stranger Than Paradise, people said, well, is John Lurie just playing himself? Well, no, he wasn't, but the character contained parts of himself, So I still kind of operate that way. But it also wasn't a conscious thing. I've worked with a lot of musicians, and it's not because I go out thinking, what musicians could I work with? It's just people that I know that I think would be good in a role. So I've worked with, Joe Strummer and Screamin' Jay Hawkins and other people that are also musicians, Iggy Pop and different people. But all of those were people I knew before I wrote something for them. I mean, I knew them personally, so it was something in their personality I was trying to take and put part of that in a character and have them, suppress other parts of their personality. Sorry,
No, I think you're going to... In fact, hold on a second. Because you're going to run out of water.
I'm dehydrating.
There you go. The bottle's down there.
I'm talking too much.
Well, you're just going to have to stop.
It's nonsense.
Of course, the film's got these two lines. Well, it's got many lines, but the I scream, you scream, we all scream for. I imagine you get asked about that a lot. And the other one, which has completely slipped my mind, A Sad and Beautiful World. A Sad and Beautiful World, I believe, came out of a Benini not reading right. Anyway, what's the story behind those two lines? Did you write them or what?
Well, I scream, you scream, we all scream for ice cream is a little thing kids chant, since I was a kid. So that was just a childish thing that got thrown into the script. It's a Sad and Beautiful World was something that Roberto misunderstood. I forget what the line was. Now I can't remember. It's something sad and beautiful something, but it wasn't world. Word, I think it was. That's a sad and beautiful word, or something in the script. And then Roberto misunderstood that, and then Tom and I just looked at each other and said, because Roberto, it's not his line, I don't think. It's first Tom Waits' line. But Roberto said something, he said, it's a sad and beautiful world, not understanding. And we just said, yeah, that's the line. That's the line. So we, that entered the film that way.
It entered sort of basically modern culture, actually. I mean, when you get these moments, you say, your face kind of lit up a little bit when you said, yeah, that's the line. And is there a moment when you realize you've kind of got something that's, at least for you guys in the room at the time, is really cool and then sort of actually carries forth? Yeah,
well, it goes back to that thing where Nick Ray said, if you're just going to shoot the script, then why bother? Because you have to be open to things happening and changing, and accidents or mistakes often can be real gifts, and you have to be open to them. You can't have your mind shut off and just think, no, that's not the way it's written. You have to just kind of be aware and intuitive all the time. So I think a lot of interesting things come that way, because when you're making a film, there are a lot of things you cannot control, and yet you're attempting to control all these things and create this fake reality in front of the camera. But, the sun goes behind a cloud, or it starts to rain, or the police come and chase you away. There are often things that you can't control those. So sometimes you have to think that I forget what scene, there's something in one of my films where it was not raining in the script, but it started to rain, and then people on the crew said, oh, it's raining, we can't do the scene, we have to do something else. But instead I just stopped and thought, well, wait, why can't it be in the rain? Maybe there's something better if it's raining, or, things like that. I think you have to just keep yourself open. But again, I'm only talking about my own process, because I really believe there's as many filmmakers as there are that many ways to make a film. So some people, like Alfred Hitchcock was very, very formulaic, and he shot a storyboard, and his film was totally designed before he even rolled a camera. And that's one way to make a film. And although Hitchcock is not Max O'Fools for me, or Nick Ray, he's still a great filmmaker, but that's a different style. So I don't want to say this is the way people should do it. I'm just talking about my way. So, there are many ways to make a film, but my way involves a lot of intuition. At the same time, I've never made a film where I didn't have a script. And I know there are some directors that just go out and start filming with a few notes, which I'm sort of in awe of them to be able to do that. I kind of wish I could do that. But I need a roadmap, but I also need everyone to know that we may take some different roads that aren't on the map. We may take some detours here. So be prepared to, change some tires and drive off into the woods occasionally.
So Mystery Train, how did that come up? And it was in color, glorious color.
Mystery Train, yes. Again, photographed by Robbie Mueller, like Down by Law. Shot in Memphis. That came about from my love of music from Memphis. And when I wrote the script, I had never been to Memphis before. The same with Down by Law. I had never been to New Orleans when I wrote the script. And it was also, in a way, my love of the music of New Orleans that sort of pulled me toward it. And Memphis, of course, is an incredible place historically, musically, because it's the direct cross of the railroad lines going from the East Coast to the West Coast, going from New Orleans and the sort of Delta up to Chicago. And it's right at that cross is Memphis. So Memphis is an incredible place musically. Of course, the birthplace in a way of rock and roll, of rockabilly, but of so many forms of gospel music mixing with blues and C.W. Handy and all the blues musicians that moved through there. And a lot of ghosts there too, So I was just drawn there musically and thought, I want to make a film in Memphis. And I had a little sketch for an idea for, I thought might be a play, and I don't know why I've never written a play before or since, and I'm not a big theater person, although certain experimental theater in the late 70s, early 80s was very interesting to me, like Richard Foreman and Robert Wilson. And the Squat Theater Company, of course. But I had this little play of this two teenage lovers in a hotel room. And then I started making them Japanese and started my script for two Japanese kids, sort of on a pilgrimage to Memphis, and a rock and roll pilgrimage. And then I got the idea of making it like a train, where I have 3 train cars and 3 different stories that kind of somehow intersect in some way. So it was kind of a fun thing to write about simultaneity and have 3 stories happening at the same time, but you have to go back to the beginning again for each one. And Memphis being a very basic element of it, and the music of Memphis. And then it turned into these 3 little stories for Mystery Train. There's a reference to Chaucer in the film. They walk down a street called Chaucer Street. In Memphis, a lot of streets are named after poets, which is very strange to me too, for America. And I like that, and Chaucer wrote the structure of the Canterbury Tales as people on a pilgrimage telling little stories. So I like that idea as well, and I don't know, all these things kind of get collaged together, and then I just start writing something.
And you find that travelers and traveling is a constant motif?
I guess it is, yeah. I guess it is. I mean, I love traveling myself. It opens up your imagination when you don't know a culture very intimately. So I don't know, it does something to you when you're in a place that is somewhat foreign to you. And I really love that. And I guess it seeps into the themes of my films somehow. Again, it's not a conscious thing. I don't sit down. Now I must write another film about people traveling. I don't really know exactly where it comes from, except my love of traveling. I love to be in places. I love to go to Tokyo, where I love to take the subway by myself in Tokyo and then try to figure out how the hell to get back to where I started from, because the signs aren't even in English, you know? And at a certain point, you get out on those subway lines in Tokyo and you don't even find someone that speaks English, so it can be really interesting.
You never got yourself completely lost?
I always found my way back. I definitely got lost a few times. I got very lost in one city in Tokyo, in Japan. I forget which one now. Way in the south of Japan, where I got extremely lost in the middle of the night. But anyway, it's kind of interesting.
So when you wrote Night on Earth, you weren't thinking about writing the stories about people charging around in foreign countries in taxi cabs, presumably?
No, you know, let me get some water. Night on Earth kind of grew out of frustration, where I had a film, one of the several times when I had a project I was really, really working toward, and something happened to stop it or delay it that was not in my control. And I had put so much into this one project that I got really kind of depressed and disillusioned and frustrated. So after about a month of just kind of moping around in my house and not even going out, I forget, one of my friends said, "Man, what are you doing? Why don't you just write something else real fast, you know?" And I was like, "Yeah, easy for you to say, you know?" And then, like a few days later, I thought, well, they're absolutely right, you know? So I thought about different friends that I had around the world, or well, in Europe, not all around the world, in the States, or actors that I liked. So I started writing for specific people. So I had my friends in Finland, and I had Roberto here in Rome, and Isaac de Bancolet from Paris, and Beatrice Dahl, who I knew. And then I had just met, very oddly, I met Jenna Rollins and Winona Ryder, not at the same place, but in the same 2-day period. I met them both in New York. And so I just started writing for all of them, and I wrote the script in like 9 days, very, very fast, and then just proceeded with that film. And I thought at the time, this will be an easy film to make. You're in little cabs, and it's a very small cast. But it was a really hard film to make, because shooting in cars, I knew was difficult, but I never really realized you make a whole film basically in car interiors that are actually moving through a city. And there's not rear projection, and you're not on a sound stage. And you have to light them, and you have to record the sound, and then you add on top of it that you're shooting in Los Angeles, then New York, Helsinki, Rome, Paris, you know. It was very complicated, and I'd have to get part of a new crew in each place and sort of start over again. So it was actually a difficult film to make. I thought it would be easy, but I wrote it very fast, and I was very lucky to have the people I wrote it for all wanted to be in it. So it was easy to put together, and not so easy to actually film.
Do you like the film?
Yeah, I do. I like it. I think I like all of my films to some degree, but people think this is weird, but I honestly refuse to see my films again once they're finished, and I've seen them with an audience that it's not a film festival, and they don't know I'm there. And I go see the film in an audience in a theater, and then I've never seen them again, any of them. And when I have to, say, do a new, like a digital master for video or something, I make them show me the reels out of order to color time them, and I want no sound. So I'm not looking at the film as a film. I'm looking at it as technical elements that I'm adjusting. So I don't like looking back, and I don't look at any of my films again once I've sort of completed them. So it's kind of hard to know how I feel about them now. I can only tell you how I felt about them when I finished them.
You don't get curious? You don't think, oh,
No, you know, I made the film. You spend so much time making a film. For me, it's like 2 years to make a film because I write it and then get the money together with the help of other people, shoot the film. I'm there in the editing room every day. Then I promote the film. I oversee its licensing and some of the business side. And by that point, man, I've seen the film 1,000 times. I don't really need to see it again, you know?
even at the distance of 10, 15 years?
Well, that might occur to me later, but so far I'm not curious really to look at them.
Ghost Dog, one of the more static films in the sense that the guy is not on the road. How did that come up, and how did you get, why did you choose Forest Whitaker?
Well, I met Forest Whitaker. I was making a film with Neil Young, Year of the Horse, a film about Crazy Horse, his band. And I was shooting that film mostly on Super 8. And in Los Angeles, in the Valley, there's the Super 8 Sound, a place that processes Super 8 film. So I would go there and, you know, get film material, or they would transfer what I'd shot and show me it. And in the parking lot, I met Forest Whitaker. I hadn't met before. And he had a Super 8 film camera. He was interested in Super 8, and he was at the lab. And we just started talking in the parking lot, because I was a fan of his as an actor, but I'd never met him, and I didn't have an idea for him. And he said to me very sincerely, you know, often actors say, hey, we should do something together sometime, you know. But Forrest, he said it very sincerely. He said, you know, man, if you ever think of me, I'd love to do something with you, anything. So just, you know that I mean that. And I knew he meant that, because he's that kind of person, you know. So I took that away. I didn't have a project really in my head. I had some ideas, but then I started building thoughts in my head around working with Forrest in a kind of character that I had not seen him play before. So I kind of started pulling that film together. It was also a kind of collage of ideas, like often my films are. I was interested in Eastern philosophy. I was interested in samurai culture and samurai films. I was interested in hip-hop. I was interested in post-bop jazz, you know. So all of these things kind of informed the film in some way. And I started collecting elements. I was interested in crime films. I was very interested in the New York organized crime families, because in the neighborhood I lived was the Gambino family, and they were always on the street. I saw them every day hanging around. Their social club was right there. So I had some interaction with them. I was interested in their decline, because they really weren't happening much anymore, you know? So I was interested in that, just kind of culturally, and why are these New York crime families waning and their worlds being enclosed? That was another element that sort of entered into the film. So I kind of collected all these things, but building them around a very solid character that Forest Whitaker would portray, that would have a code of his own that the rest of the world wouldn't follow or recognize, and that would not affect his code, that he would not be deterred from it, you know. And of course, samurai culture and the samurai code, and the book, the Hagakure, The Way of the Samurai, which I had read a lot about that culture, and because I was interested in Japanese cinema, and saw a lot of samurai movies, and then consequently read a lot about that whole philosophy. So I kind of just took all those pieces and started collaging them together in my head, and then making notes, and with Forrest as the center, you know, the real impetus to make the film. And then this is the resulting film. And I got the RZA, who was, you know, I was a big fan of the Wu-Tang since their first record. And people, you know, I always think, who is my ideal, what musician? It was the one musician on the planet I'd like to get for this film. And it was the RZA right away. So then I found a way to meet the RZA and to, you know, hang out with him a little bit and see if he might be interested. And so all those pieces kind of came together, and I sort of sculpted them into this script and then into the film itself. Again, shot by Robbie Mueller.
Was it an easy shoot? Was it an enjoyable shoot?
It wasn't so easy because it was quite a big crew, because when you shoot in the New York area now, unlike when I started, you have a lot of union obligations. So I had quite a large crew, and that was a little frustrating at times because I'm used to driving along and seeing a location and saying, stop, stop, I want to shoot here. Well, you can't do that when you have all these trucks and rules and, you know. So there were frustrating things about it, but it was also a really great crew of people and an interesting experience filming. It wasn't bad. It wasn't always a party or anything like that, you know, like Down by Law kind of was.
Yeah, it does look like it might have been.
Yeah, it was kind of a wild shoot. And that was so much fun, almost too much fun, that we never slept, you know. So Ghost Dog was different, but they're all different.
Was it important to have the Way of the Samurai in the title?
I guess it was, since I put it in there, because I wanted a samurai reference in the title, so you knew going in that it was sort of a portrait of a samurai, whereas Ghost Dog might only sound like hip-hop or a Native American name or something, you know.
Which has been the most commercially, yeah? Cinque? Due? Two? Well, we covered the big bases.
Yeah, we didn't talk about Dead Man at all, but
No, I would like to, but then the time is against us. Well, actually, have you got a 30-second soundbite on Dead Man to insult the dead man's intelligence?
well, Dead Man was the most difficult film for me to make because I didn't have enough money. It's a period film. You had to shoot in a lot of strange places. We had to move our crew all around. We shot all over in Arizona. We shot in Nevada. We shot in Northern California and in Oregon, you know. And you can't see a telephone wire or a road or see a plane, you know. It was period costume with a truck full of horses. So that one was difficult. But in a way, I'm the most proud of it in retrospect in some ways because it seems to have the most sort of deepest level of layers of different themes in it, even though the surface story is quite simple. And the sort of main theme of the film of life and death being circular is kind of simple. I was able to throw in a lot of things, metaphors and references to industrialization, to what America is, to the genocide of Native Americans, to railroads, to violence, and, you know, to fame. There were a lot of little sub-themes I could kind of weave through it. So that one was very interesting to me, and in my memory holds up pretty well. Again, I haven't seen it since 1995 or 6, but it was very hard film, the hardest film to make. But I was happy with how it came out.
And of course you had Johnny Depp in there.
Johnny Depp, amazing, yeah. A whole slew of amazing actors in that film. Robert Mitchum's last film, and so many great people in it. John Hurt is in it, and Gabriel Byrne, and Lance Henriksen, and a lot of amazing people.
As the clock is now against me completely, the last question, significant question is, okay, you've been doing this more or less for 27 years now, working primarily outside the studio system. Apparently only one, is it Broken Flowers, is your first official studio film?
I wouldn't consider it a studio film because I had Final Cut and I made the film the same way I made all of my films. And I had complete control over the casting. No one came in my editing room, came in on my set. I just delivered the finished film, basically. So it was fine, you know, anyway. To me, it wasn't a classically structured studio film. To me, it was the same as all the others, really, in terms of what I needed to have control over.
So, in fact, excuse the frivolity of the phrase here, but in the 27 years, what have you learned?
What have I learned? As Nick Ray says in Wim Wenders' film, The American Friend, a little older, a little more confused. I mean, I guess I just learned that I still have a lot to learn, you know, and it's a great pleasure to investigate a form like this, and have had this chance. So, you know, I can't give you a straight answer to what I've learned, really. But I know I just love I love the form of cinema so much. It just seems to open itself up more and more each film I see, as well as each film I make. But that's an impossible question.
Mr. Jarmusch, sir, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.